So today I'm going to show you how to make a scone based pizza. So traditionally a pizza would be made with a yeast base, like a bread base. This is just a different alternative way of making a pizza. It's quite good because it uses store covered ingredients and it's pretty easy to make. And it uses a rubbing in method, which is the same method that we have used for the rock buns, for scones and also for the crumble. So we need to get the oven set at 180 degrees centigrade, and then we need to grease and line a tin to cook the pizza in. So this recipe will make 2 small pizzas, or you could make a larger one. I'm using a Victoria sponge tin here with some greaseproof paper. So I grease the bottom of the tin, pop the paper on the top, and then I'm just greasing around the edges. That's to make my washing up less, but also to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom of the tin. If I haven't got a Victoria sponge tin like that, I could simply use a baking tray, and again I could line it with greaseproof, or I could just grease the baking tray as it is. So either of those would be perfectly fine. The advantage of using the Victoria sponge tin is it's already in that nice round shape, and it'll be able to shape your pizzas a bit better. Of course you might have a pizza tray that you could shape it on as well. First stage is to make your base. So as I said, we're using a scone base which uses self-raising flour. We're going to sieve that self-raising flour into the bowl. Okay, the reason we're using self-raising flour, as I think we remember from the rock buns, is because it contains baking powder, which will react and produce carbon dioxide when the base is cooking, which will help the base rise and give it a light texture. We're sieving it in order to incorporate some air into the mixture. Once I've sieved the flour in, I'm going to incorporate the butter or margarine or whatever fat that I've got at home that I can use. I'm just going to start by breaking that into smaller pieces. Could use a knife, a table knife, to cut this up if I wanted, but it saves on my washing up. And I'm going to rub that in. So if you remember last time when we made the rock buns, rubbing in is where you move your thumb across your fingertips, and then you lightly rub it in, lifting it up, so you're ensuring that you're getting all of that flour, all of the flour particles or grains coated with that margarine. So until I get no large lumps. So if I shape that bowl, and I'm going to see a few lumps of fat in there still, so I just need to mix those up. If I look at my hands, I shouldn't really see any fat or flour in that palm. The palm is the warmest part of your hand, and if I do get lots of fat on there, it's probably going to get a bit sticky and a bit unmanageable. So just get that rubbed in like so. Shape the bowl, no large lumps of fat. It'll be ready for our liquid in a minute. So lots of traditional recipes would add salt, and we're not going to add salt, and that's for health reasons, because we should be cutting down on the amount of salt that we have in our diet. So in order to bring this together as a dough, I'm going to make a well in the middle, and into that well I'm going to add my milk, and I'm going to add the 100 millilitres of milk. I'm just going to make sure that I add most of that, but leave a tiny bit in the bottom. I always call that a smidgen, so a very small amount in the bottom as well. When you're measuring with a measuring jug as well, always make sure you have it on a flat surface and you look to check the measurement so the measurement is accurate. So I'm going to add pretty much all of that into the mixture. As you can see, I've left just a tiny bit in the bottom in case. I probably will need that. I'm just being a little bit cautious. I'm then going to stir that up, and hopefully that will come together as a dough. I can see it's already coming together, and I'm quite pleased I didn't quite add all of that milk, because I think it possibly would have been a tiny bit too much. I'm going to stir that up. There's a couple of dry bits there, so I'm just going to add the tiniest amount of milk into that, and then give it a stir. Okay, then it's time to get my hands into the mixture to bring that mixture to a dough. So one hand, when I say one hand is a really good thing, because this hand remains relatively clean, so I can open cupboards, collect equipment, etc. And also it means you don't force the dough together. So you can see that mixture has come nicely to a dough. It's a little bit sticky, so I probably will need a little bit of extra flour in a minute. Okay, so once that dough has come together, I'm just going to add a little bit extra flour just to make it a bit easier to handle. And I'm going to pop it onto my work surface. Now, as I said, this dough is going to make 2 smaller pizzas. So for the moment, I'm just going to divide it into 2 and show you how to make the one pizza. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour onto my worktop. Make sure I start with a ball of dough, and then I'm just going to roll and turn. Now, you don't really have to use a rolling pin. You could just press it out into the shape that you want. Now whenever I roll it, I'm always moving it to check that it is not sticking to the work surface. So it's sticking a little bit there. Sorry, that's my dog in the background barking. So just going to turn that around there. So then I'm going to get my small Victoria sponge tin. I'm going to pop the dough in, and I'm just going to form it around into the small circular shape, like so. So here you can see one that I've rolled out and popped onto a baking tray, and the shape isn't so good. So I'm just going to use the curve of my hand to curve it around, and that should help me get a circular shape. And to be fair, these can look pretty rustic. They don't have to look perfect around the edges. Okay, like so. So I've got my two bases, one on a Victoria sponge tin and just one on a baking tray, just to show you two ways of doing it. So I've left the bases to one side, and I'm just going to prep some topping. I'm actually only going to make this into a margarita, so just a plain topping, just with tomato and cheese. I'm not going to add any other additional flavours or toppings on there other than some herbs, some dried herbs, probably oregano. But you can obviously add whatever topping you want. Onion, sweet corn, mushroom, a whole variety of things. I'm sure you're aware that you could add onto the top of your pizza. A bit like the pizza toast that you possibly have made before. You can choose your own toppings. So just remember, when you're using a grater, these are like lots of mini knives, so do be careful with your fingers. Always grate down, and always grate down to a board rather than over the top of the food. It's just a little bit safer. Don't worry about that bit breaking off. We can just be careful when you get down to that last little bit. Okay, of course you could use mozzarella cheese, which is a bit more traditional, which you'll buy in a bag surrounded with water. So you can just take that out of the bag and just chop that up. You won't need to grate that. You can buy grated mozzarella if you wish. Pop your tomato onto your pizza. Make sure you pop it on and you have a frame. I always find the best way to pop the tomato on is by using a spoon. Now what I mean by a frame is you don't go right up to the edge. Couple of reasons for that. You don't want to get tomato onto your baking tray, because then it burns and it's harder to wash up, but also then it just looks more appealing, and when you're eating it, it just gives you a part of the pizza that's not sort of sticky with topping. Okay, so you can see there's a little frame around the outside. Now I've actually used a ragu type dolmio sauce because I'm going to be making the spaghetti bowl later, so I've just taken a spoonful of that out to put onto the pizza. You could use tomato puree, you could use sliced tomatoes, you could use some tin chopped tomatoes, whole variety of things. You could even add barbecue sauce, but obviously that would be very high in sugar, so this would be a little bit healthier. For that base, I'm just going to put some cheese and sprinkle that cheese on the top. You don't need much. And then onto that, I'm just going to put some oregano. Now, oregano is a traditional Italian herb that is good to go onto pizzas. Basil, it also works really well, but really you can use any sort of mixed herbs. I'm just going to pop that on the top. So now I'm just going to pop that in the oven. So it's a relatively hot oven at 180 degrees, hopefully preset earlier. If not, pop it on now. Just leave it for 5 or 10 minutes so it comes up to heat, and then pop it in safely. Make sure you're using oven gloves when you're going to the oven and coming out of the oven. And this actually cooks very quickly, so it should only take about 10 minutes to cook. So that pizza, when it's done, should have a little bit of a golden colour, with the cheese nicely melted on the top, and the base should hold its own shape. So I'm just going to get a palette knife. I could just use a table knife. I'm just going to loosen around. It's pretty loose anyway, and I'm going to lift that onto my plate. You can see that the grease-proof paper stayed in the bottom, okay, of the tin, and the tin is relatively clean. It's not going to be too difficult to wash up. So that's the final pizza. As I said, it's a little bit different than your traditional pizza, because we've made it with a scone base. I hope you enjoy eating it, and I hope you enjoyed making it. Always remember to wash and clean up after you've cooked in your kitchens at home, and make sure you're really clean and tidy and hygienic when you're cooking as well. Thank you.